Hello everyone, we are here to talk about the new book Business and Management Doctorates Worldwide, Developing the Next Generation. This book by Nicola Palmer, Julie Davis and Claire Viney is an amazing opportunity to see a wide-ranging international comparisons and reflections on the purpose and innovations in doctoral education offered by business schools today. With me, I have Nicola Palmer, Julie Davis, Claire Viney, three amazing women that are working in the business school and the doctoral programs for quite a while now. And they've joined up in this amazing task of putting together experiences in this brand new book. So let's begin. They are the authors of our book, Business and Management Doctorates Worldwide, Developing the Next Generation. And if you had a chance to look into the cover of the book, you'll see why this is so interesting for us. So what was the inspiration for the book?
Yeah, our inspirations really stem from our involvement. So three of us collectively have been involved in doctoral education in business schools and or more generally or research development for over 15 years now. And I've attended probably about 10 EFMD doctoral programs conferences across Europe over the years. And I found it fascinating to listen to the discussions about different practices and different ambitions of business and management doctoral education. From different countries and from different educators. And Julie and Claire and I met at Grenoble at one of the EFMD conferences. Was it the first one?
It was my first one. That's where I met you all. Yeah. And that's where you met as well.
Yeah, it was a milestone event. And it certainly was in terms of getting us to think about how much wonderful conversation and dialogue was happening at that conference. And we really started to think about opportunities to share and capture some of those conversations.
Yeah, I remember Claire. So Claire, you were the chief executive officer. You are the chief executive officer at Careers Research and Advisory Center, and I perfectly remember your talk in Grenoble for that year, and the energy you brought into us taking care of the doctoral students, not just as academics, but as a future generation of contributors. So, what motivated you to progress with the book and join up with these two wonderful professionals and ladies, Nicola and Julie? And what are the key message that you wanted to actually put in the book and make sure that we had it for the public?
So I think it's always fun to collaborate, and it's always fun collaborating with Nicola and Julie. That's why our friendship has survived, and the book actually has got across the line. COVID meant that it was delayed slightly, but we were really clear that the business school doctoral experience just needed the cover lifting, the bonnet lifting a little bit more. And how you design and deliver a doctoral education in business and management, and covering things from everything from sort of student employability to how impact and value is sort of brought together in that international business and academic agenda. So we try to think about all the different perspectives. And certainly in the UK, there's a real focus on research environment, culture, capacity, capabilities, and connectivity. And that's something that we all three of us feel really passionately. Environments that are conducive for learning and to support research cultures is really, really, it's dynamic and it's shifting and changing. And those various paradigms, we wanted to look at them from different perspectives. So, it was specifically, we wanted to emphasize the importance of a relational approach, and that trust needed to be developed, and that things like in research integrity and equity and diversity and inclusion and a sense of belonging are really, really important for that next generation of researchers. You mentioned, Sophia, that when I gave that talk at Grenoble, I talked quite a lot around health and well-being. We just published some research, and we have a collective responsibility in doctoral education to focus on the health and well-being of early career researchers, especially given some of the pressures.
Exactly.
The publishing
and that was pre-COVID, actually. So you had all of that even before COVID. So it actually, the pandemic brought that so much into the light that the research that was already done was, at least in my case as well, very, very helpful to progress during the hardship times. Yeah. Julie, if I can ask, so the major difference for me, the year I first met you actually, was to see discussion of doctoral programs applied to business schools, because it was very hard for me to take that knowledge with other peers from, even within the same university, but from different schools. So what is the particularity of the business schools that makes this book so important, that we make sure that all of these practices and messages and looking into the future of the challenges, not just of the doctoral programs, but of the business schools itself? What's the main particularity of this book when it comes to being applied to the business schools?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So business schools often have many undergraduates on their programs. They have a lot of international students. And in some cases, particularly in non-only graduate schools, there are plenty of other distractions. And doctoral students are the lifeblood of the professions of, this applied subject that we're teaching, which is the most popular subject in all universities around the world. So I think what's particular about business schools is their sheer size, the importance that they are to the university sector, higher education sector, and the great mobility and internationality movement we see. So I think it's very important, as Mark Saunders often says, that doctoral education is not seen as the Cinderella of business schools. It is absolutely important that we set up students for success, and we support, as Claire said, the well-being, the health and the inclusion and sense of belonging of our students as well as supervisors. So compared with other disciplines, the sheer scale and scope, and also the variety of doctorates such as the BBA, gives that its particularity.
That's very, very good. And I have to ask about the cover, because when we first talked about doing this podcast, I actually saw 2 different options or 3 different options. I was actually kind of hoping this would be it. Not just because of the colors, but of the actual theme. But I was thinking, I need something to explain me more, because I would definitely pick this up, but I would need to at least open a bit to see what it was really about. So who wants to talk a bit about the cover and the general theme of the cover and why it's so interesting?
Yeah, so I was struck by the cover. It did actually have a coffee cup in one of the original images. So I think what we were trying to get over was the importance of a helicopter view. So we have a helicopter, like the big picture. You have to be quite strategic when you're doing, your doctorate in terms of your career and how you're organizing yourself, but also look at the details and the narrow focus. I remember I had a boss at University College London in chemistry a long time ago, and he's David Williams, and he said, to do a PhD, you have to get your brain into the size of a pea. It's much narrower than if you're doing undergraduate or masters. So that level of detail and mental focus, looking at ants and how hardworking they are and how they organize themselves, is very important. And also the sense of community as well, that it's very important to network and build up co-authors and connections, linking theory and scholars and practitioners. So that kind of metaphorically, the book cover conveys that big picture view as well as the level of detail.
And that's true, because we usually think about doctoral programs as a lone wolf and not as an ant community and an ant farm. So having that view is very, very important. So also that our students, thrive and be able to, even if they are lone wolves at some part of their program, when they get out, they are part of an ant farm and a big community that, has all of these intricate connections and very unique connections, right? Every ant farm has its own identity.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so teams and collaboration matters.
Team matters a lot, right? In this case. Also, another point of view, collecting. How did you collect information for it? So, of course, you all between all three, you have many years of experiences and hundreds of network and connections. How did you start? Collecting. Was it easy to collect this information? And what difference did it make in your own daily lives and professions when you were collecting this information and all of the information for the book? How did you manage to input that in your own lives, in your own projects? How did it work? I don't know if Nicola or Claire want to take up this one.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in there. So I think it's fair to say, Claire's already mentioned that we'd met back at the conference in Grenoble. The following year in Frankfurt at the FMD conference, we actually sat down and started to plan this book. And then things started to change. So initially, I think at the starting point was really thinking about a geographical focus. Yeah, with the emphasis on worldwide. Yeah,
to be more ambivalent, but also because the UK schools tend to do this connection a lot. But outside of the UK, it's also important to see what the rest of the world is doing.
Definitely. And, when we started to read around the literature and what had been written more generally and more broadly on global doctoral education through writers such as Neerad, we saw there was a lot already out there, looking country by country or region by region. So we decided to shift away from that to take a more thematic approach. And then we... there's quite a long story really to the birth of this book, so to speak. But then we had the COVID-19 pandemic that, disrupted the world and doctoral education within that. And it was quite refreshing in some ways. And we've written previously about how that pandemic presented a crisis as an opportunity for doctoral education. But what it also did is it made us really reflect a lot more and stop and think about why we do things the way that we do and how we do things the way that we do. So we started off thinking thematically, thinking about key issues around the growth and patterns in doctoral education, in business and management worldwide, moving through a little bit of the doctoral candidate life cycle in terms of recruitment and selection and retention, and then the doctoral experience, and as Claire mentioned, the research environment. But along the way, you'll notice in the book, we really, really encourage readers to stop and reflect. So what we don't want this to be is a book of this is the way it is, It's really, I suppose, our perspective, from reading the literature, from networking, from experiencing different models of doctoral education around the world. It's really teasing out issues for readers to reflect on as they navigate their way through there. And something we also added in were some reflections around the future. Prospects for the future, what changes had happened during the years from 2020 to 2022, in particular, in terms of provision. So, it really is a work that evolved over time, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you, Nicola. Claire, what do you think are the key challenges when developing actually this next generation? So what are we, if you had to put it into top 3 challenges for business schools and what we have to do in terms of developing our next generation of doctoral students?
So I think that's a really tough one to call, because I think the challenges are different depending on the different parts of the world. Who are we developing doctoral researchers for? And what is Julie's mentioned the fact that, doctoral education is expensive. The bread and butter of business schools are MBAs. And so who are these people? Where are they going? What are their career trajectories? So I think there are challenges around managing expectations. I think there is where are they going, and are we meeting the needs of their future employers? Many of the doctoral researchers will remain in academia, or we believe that they remain in academia, but is that really the case? And so I think there is some evidence about being honest and open about the data and evidence about where people are going, and are we meeting the needs of their future employers? I think we're probably meeting the needs of the academic employer, but are we meeting the needs of those that go beyond? Should we be increasing the absorptive capacity? What can we do to think about those doctoral researchers and graduates who go into business and beyond? And then I guess really the third thing is how we create flexible, open researchers who can really, as Nicola and Julie have said, is really develop those critical skills that are needed to solve global challenges. Because, business and management researchers don't sit in isolation. They are part of teams. They are part of solving really big, wicked problems. And so how do we help through reflective practice, researchers understand what skills they have, how to develop themselves, and how to work collaboratively and as part of teams. So, I think that there is so many learnings from the journey, the book journey, and the COVID compounded some of the opportunities that business and management schools have to be flexible and to be, open. And I think I see lots of fantastic practice that could probably be learned from across, the other parts of academic institutions. And so I think business and management schools need to be more vocal about with the evidence that they have of how they're developing that next generation.
I've seen some very interesting articles, and all of them are around the same thing, which is the role of business schools in preparing for the future of business education, the new landscape, the volatile world, transformational leadership, how business schools can actually help employers managing aging workforces and all of that. So all of that revolves around the role of business schools for the future. And there's been a lot of discussion on that. On your analysis of these many business schools all around the world, did you feel that the schools are, preparing for this? They are starting to think about this, but are they actually preparing and making changes now? Or is it something that we will see, if another pandemic hits, or if something different affects the system, and then we are forced to act?
I think it's a really, really interesting question, Sophia. I think it's really probably there's an uneven playing field out there. So what we find when we start to delve into and explore the doctorate in business and management is there are a lot of entrenched norms and traditions and ways of doing things around many business schools still, that sometimes, can stifle that innovation and different approaches. So it's really, really healthy, and it was really refreshing to stop and pause and question why things happen, why things are done the way that they are done, and what differences might happen, through taking a different approach. So what we've done in the book, we do start to pinpoint and highlight some examples of creative practices and doing things differently. But there are pockets, I think it's fair to say, across the world. It's not all happening in a certain global region, but there's some real pockets of refreshing practice where things are starting to happen quite differently. And Julie mentioned earlier on, the professional doctorates and the DBA, and we can chart in some regions such as Australia the rise and the fall of the DBA, but there's still a lot of mileage and a lot of conversation in institutions more broadly around that academic and practice divide. So there's lots of lessons to be learnt there. And lots to be developed still. So I think it's a mixed picture in terms of how responsive business schools are.
And what can we expect in terms of those practices and in terms of the examples of the book? Can we expect something that is already looking forward to, digital AI, because the discussion has been going on and it will increase immensely in the next couple of years? Or are these practices more towards humanizing the programs and making them, useful for the community and making sure that we open that part of academia to the society as well? Do we have a mix? Do we already have a mix of these practices? Because they've been going back to 2020, 2021, 2022. How do you feel that these practices are related? More humane, digital? Do you have examples?
Yeah, so maybe I could give an example from the Global Business School for Health, where we have a DBA in health. So absolutely, the human side matters. We're equipping people to work with increasingly, complex comorbidities and aging populations. But we're running out of people. So it's very important also, for example, in the healthcare sector, that we use the benefits of digital health and AI and generative AI technology, so we can take the physical burden off, aging healthcare workers themselves, and we can use technology intelligently. But we also, as you say, keep the human side too. If people are living much longer and need more care and we have fewer carers, then we can be more strategic about how we use technology and the workforce. So very much, projects like DBA projects in strategic workforce development in the health sector. I'm working with students on those kind of topics, and data analytics. I think you can't ignore the digital side,
of course,
on doctoral programs. And Nicola's teaching on this program too.
Good.
So we're bringing in healthcare specialists, non-healthcare specialists. So interdisciplinarity, cross-functional teams, supporting our students on doctorates in business schools, make it really, you can see the impact and the engagement, and it's much more motivating then for people to get through, because they see they're really making a difference to UN Sustainable Development Goals and society more broadly.
And students are starting to look into it, right? So when they go into this career, I've seen students that don't just want to follow the track as they used to. They want to actually make a difference from the start, and that also contributes to to anxiety, to everything, because they want to matter right from the start. And sometimes we have to take our time. But this will be, of course, next generation will have all of this world situation around us, into their system, into their beliefs, into everything that we are now doing. So I can't reveal the title yet, but for the next doctoral programs conference by EFMD that will take place at Nova School of Business and Economics next May, we don't have the title yet, but we have a general theme, which I think I'm allowed to, as the host of the conference next year, I think I'm allowed to reveal a bit. We are looking into not just the future of doctoral programs, but how to make sure that we integrate all of these, AI capacities, not just in the program itself, but also on the supervisors, on the program managers, on the students and their curriculum. But how do we keep it humane in a world that's completely transitional to digital interaction and AI and everything? So it's not going back, it's looking to the future, but with a very humane lens. If we had to have a blank slate and we did a doctoral program structure now, what would we include? What would we want to make sure that, if we had a school that would buy that program on the spot, what would that program be like? So that's the general topic. So I also hope that whoever is listening and all of you are able to join and maybe even talk a bit more about this book. Okay. I'm not going to make an invitation on this podcast because it's being streamed, but we can cut this part. But I sort of am. I think it would be a very good opportunity for all of you and for all of us who are joining the conference to hear more about your findings and about the book. If you had to, I'm going to ask the same question for all three of you, okay? And so you can take your time answering. If someone, professional, doctoral student, or even, actually no, I'm rethinking the question. So imagine that you can deliver this book to a dean, any dean around the world, okay? Any business school, any dean. The dean will read the book. You are sure of that. Okay, so you deliver the book, the dean opens the book and reads the book. He closes the book. What would you like that dean, after that moment when it closes the book or, puts the X on the file, if it's the online version, when he closes the book, what would you like to be the thought on that dean's mind towards progressing the doctoral programs of that business school?
I think, Julie's point about the doctorate being very often the underdog or the Cinderella of business schools is really, really important. So I would really like one of the takeaways to be some reflection on the value and the values of business school doctorates. So there are a lot of key principles that underpin this book. And, if I had to give you some sort of key take home keywords, it's about relational, being collaborative, inclusive, impactful. There's lots of messages that come through, I think, from the examination that we've done. But I really, really would like, I want a takeaway to be, let's stop and realise the value and the potential of the doctorate beyond an individual educational award. Yeah, so where could we go? Where can this doctorate take us as an institution? How can it help our collaboration with industry partners from different industry sectors and different spheres, etc.? How can it help us to collaborate between universities? Because there's a beautiful model that we mention in the book in Montreal, Canada, whereby universities come together to co-deliver their doctoral programs. So it's about moving away from that individualized competitive perspective and really thinking about how we work together more broadly as educators and in wider society. So for me, that's what I want people to stop and really reflect on the value and the potential value of doctoral education in business and management.
Thank you, Nicola. Claire, same question.
There are some really good questions at the end of each chapter that we hope will be thought-provoking for the reader. I think if I can ask people who read the book to do anything, it is to really think about those and to be honest about the answers. And if they honestly don't know the answers, to work collaboratively with colleagues, whether that, as Nicola said, whether that's colleagues within their own institutions or whether that's colleagues, hopefully, peers across the sector. Because I think, that by working and co-creating together, it will, the sum of the parts will be greater. And I think there's a real opportunity post-pandemic with all of the different technologies that we have to be able to, as Nicola said, to be able to, work collaboratively together. This isn't a competition. We all, we want to have a research culture and an environment where everyone thrives and where everyone can realise their potential.
Thank you. Julie, last but not the least.
Yes, to echo Claire in terms of synergies, I'd like a dean, he or she, to conclude that as part of their strategic plan, the doctoral education programs are absolutely critical in terms of their strategic positioning and how they can make a difference in society, in organizations, in businesses. And this is the lifeblood. So really show off and showcase your doctoral students and your teams and your supervisors. And very importantly, we're looking at ecosystems here. So how can you build the strengths of these collaborations across universities? Often, business schools don't necessarily talk to other bits of the university, the local regions, policy makers, because I think what we're doing is critically important, and we do need, in a world of fake news, we need this doctoral mindset where people can collect data, be innovative, analyze it, and then communicate it. So the research and development framework that Claire Vini, I bring in with my doctoral teaching, and really with deans, I think, showcasing the great things that are happening in doctoral education and doctoral ecosystems.
And I must thank you, the three of you, because that very first year, I was a very young professional, fairly recent to the doctoral program. I was looking for not just inspiration, but also, different programs with the same challenges, which is exactly what I found. And all three of you were major inspirations for me, not just because you're all three absolutely amazing women, but you were so inspiring in terms of making sure that whatever you did at work was also being, collaborative with other schools. That in the fact that you all joined up and actually managed to get a book done and published is the perfect example of that. So how our doctoral program, administrations, heads, program directors, the whole village that it takes to create a doctoral student. You are the perfect example of how that can be done. And this book is the perfect example of what we can do for our doctoral programs, and most of all for our doctoral students, but most of all for our future generation of academics and the world itself. So thank you, all three of you. Don't forget, the Business and Management Doctorates Worldwide, Developing the Next Generation by Nicola Palmer, Julie Davis, and Claire Vini will be out December 4th. You can enjoy 30% off this ebook with code EME30 on ebooks.com. Don't miss out, and I hope you enjoyed our podcast. This podcast was recorded at Fidelidad Creative Studio at Nova School of Business and Economics.